Ni hao mai, assalamu alaikum, and hello from me. My name's Lawry, as just been explained. I thought I'd cut mine down, being a brain, but I just want to show you this quickly, the sound. Cut the sound. We'll set up in the other room, so if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Does your sound or not? No sound? Okay. This is a real story. What you got here is a ship heading towards another ship telling it to move, and the other person saying, well, I'm not moving, mate. And he's saying, I'm coming at you. I'm the biggest aircraft carrier in the whole fleet. Move or I'll do something about it. Another guy replies, well, actually, I'm not going to move at all. I can't. I'm a lighthouse. And then the last to hear you say, are you there? I think they've gone. So what the story there about is that if we don't change, a shipwreck could come, possibly. But the real crux of the matter I'll talk to is you get the leadership, i.e. the leadership that says we'll make a change. And somebody makes a change. So that was the point I was trying to make without the sound. So cutting it down, my brief here was to sort of go through the document and look at the good, the positive, and where it came from. I think we've all seen the positives, and I won't go through as I've itemised in my talk, but it's very positive that we feel warmer towards Asian people that we meet. That's a fantastically positive thing. I mean, in some countries that doesn't happen. You know, it is bad that there's discrimination on the street, but let's not get too carried away with it, because we can deal with that. In fact, the police are going to deal with that, and we are. There's ways of it, and I'll talk to that in a minute. More serious is institutionalised discrimination, where you can't get a job and you should. And that's where this research is particularly clever, I feel, in identifying it. So there's a tool to fix those sort of things, and this may not be PC, but stigmatisation of those individuals are allowed to happen. Imagine front page news, you know, HR consultants very prejudiced. These sort of waking up calls, you know, where you actually just move their boat a wee bit. So that was sort of a couple of things. I just thought I'd give you a little story about one of my stories that I found interesting. Because when I went to Afghanistan, how many of here know that New Zealand owns a province called Bamiyan? We actually own a province in Afghanistan. It's in the Hindish Kush. These are Zarian people who have been some of the most downtrodden people actually in Afghanistan, mostly farmers. And we've just trodden near Kiwis, and I was a bit worried about this for a time, because I wasn't sure if that was going to work in Afghanistan. It does. The old Maori up to the head works. And if you hop out and walk on down the paddock and talk about potatoes, they'll talk to you about it. And I'll tell you a little story over there. We had no woman in the police there at all. And these are Muslim people who the issue around women is a tricky issue, as you can understand. One day I decided to get rid of my weaponry, and a few of us, we took a risk and went down to see the tribal group that run this city with an idea to try and put to them that it would be safer for them to have women police dealing with their women that are being injured and talking about women's issues than it would be for policemen that don't really want to be involved, or foreigners that don't fully understand. And one of the first things I said to them was that, through a interpreter, I would say, hey look, we believe in the same God, and we do, it's exactly the same God. Can we just forget about the brothers and sisters below it for a little while and deal with some of the issues? And that was a fairly risky strategy, because these guys have had to get angry occasionally, but the bottom line is, coming out of that, they had common sense. They agreed with the idea that let's bury those things that we couldn't really agree on, but they did agree that it was safer for their women to be being dealt by their women in their culturally and religiously sensitive manners. We now have 23 police women in Bamiyan. So we have a problem with that, because a Muslim woman who's married can't be driven by anyone else except the husband. So the husband comes too, but that's okay, we can get over that. But I mean, these are the positive things you can do if you try. So turning to what the story is about here is, what can we do? Well, I think there's some risks. So from my experience in the art of winning hearts and minds of different countries, there's a definite timeline to the probability of successfully changing attitudes. The opportunity to change hearts and minds is not an open-ended. You've got to do things early or people sour. So we've got existing goodwill, but that can sour. We've outlined very positive things, but they can also evaporate, and if they do, attitudes can harden. So there is a timeline for change. There's a huge adverse going on. This is a risk. We can't have people getting unhealthy, sick, going back home having had a bad experience in New Zealand, and then selling the bad experience to everybody they know back there. Not a good thing for New Zealand at all. I sometimes wonder if the reason we stand out as being a little bit more positive is because a lot of Kiwis do travel. And actually we've been the subject of prejudice overseas when we travel. try and get a Frenchman to talk French to you in Paris. I'm sick of tourists in Paris. So maybe that's a little bit more empathy on our part, but I think that's also got a timeline. You know, all we need is a few bombs going off in New Zealand with the wrong group, and the media get on top of that. Attitudes could very quickly change. So what I'm really putting down as a risk is that there is a timeline. Therefore, from that, there needs to be a sense of urgency. How do we create the sense of urgency? Well, my view is, and I think it was spoken to just before one of the other talkers, it's not so much what we do initially, it's identifying who is going to do it. Now, there's a book called Why Business Thinking is Not the Answer, Good to Great in the Social Sectors by a chap like Jim Collins. He talks about a level 5 leader. And a level 5 leader, ambitious, and I'll just read the quote from it, are ambitious first and foremost for the cause, the organisation, the work, not themselves. And they have the fierce resolve to do whatever it takes to make good on that ambition. A level 5 leader displays a paradoxical blend of personal humility and professional will. So first of all, we need to find the who's that are going to make the changes. And I think this room's probably full of quite a few who's, that's why we're here, facilitating this particular discussion. So we need people across a whole range of sectors, academics, all sorts, to actually put their hand forward and saying, yes, we will make some changes. So I think because it's the who that actually makes it happen. The what, I think, well, here's some views that I have about what's. First of all, the myths. We need to destroy effectively the myths. For example, Asians aren't the worst drivers in the country. Absolutely inbound. With no research, everyone said that. In fact, they're grossly underrepresented in terms of the accidents and, in fact, the ticketing. So Asians are pretty good drivers, not bad drivers. Asians aren't the major criminals in the country. Wrong. They have some pretty sophisticated criminals, yes. It goes back to trades, yes. But overall crime representation, not there. So just in the police context, destroy the myths. That's what I've chosen to be. Identify the myths with the people you identify the who's, find the myths and destroy them. The stigmatisation of offenders, not PC maybe, but I do think that if individuals are going to be out there causing the harm, they do. We put drink drivers in the paper. What's the problem with putting our real bad prejudice people in the paper? And we've done it a couple of times in Canterbury, where we've actually identified persons who have in fact caused harm. We are training our staff at the moment to take absolute action around street type harm of this type. It's just not acceptable, it's unacceptable. That end of it, we're going to come down on it. But realising it's not the big picture, it is a picture. So moving to the bigger picture, employment. How do we drive changes in employment? Well, my master's was about the New Zealand Police, and we have some issues. In the New Zealand Police, our entire Asian population itself identifies 2.2% of our 11,000. It is by far our worst demographic. We pretty well match the Maori population in our organisation. In fact, in some areas where there's high Maori groups, our population in the police is up to 20% in some districts. We're pretty good with Pacific Island also, but with the Asian area, we're particularly bad. It's by far our worst demographic. Do we have any targets? No. Do we have a strategic plan that relates to them? No. Strategic plans for Maori, yes. Strategic plans for Pacific Island, and then something called other ethnic groups. Well, there's a thing called saving face in the Asian culture, and if the Asian culture is going to outnumber Maori and Pacific Island, one would think we might need a strategic plan around Asian issues. Maybe that needs to be from across all government organisations, because the government has a place to lead this discussion. So I would think there's an opportunity for strategic planning at that level, and also possibly positive discrimination. Not sure I really like it, but if you're going to have real targets, I'm a bit of a believer that if something's going to get done, it better be measurable, and it better be there as a target for someone to do. Otherwise, it's very easy not to get done. Now, the New Zealand Police level from Asian recruitment has not grown particularly well at all. We're trying, and I would actually, absolutely honestly, anyone out there wants to join the New Zealand Police at the moment? We absolutely need those skills. So, okay. I was going to talk about another problem too, because we're talking about risks. you've actually got some demographics sitting up there, but one of the ones that's not mentioned is that Asian youth. Now, the research document indicated that a lot of discrimination is Kiwi youth giving Asian members a bit of a hard time. Well, what happens in the year 2021, where it's predicted that 15% of New Zealand youth will be Asian, and the Asian youth decide to take on the Kiwi youth about the common? That's a recipe for problems if we don't solve that. So I would suspect that some of the energies we have to do, the what, is around addressing those issues. Public policy, well, there needs to be a drive, like I said, around strategic planning. And I think there's a very good indicator what to do is around the headings under belonging, participation, inclusion, recognition and legitimacy. That to me is a bit of a pathway for the what's to do when we get the who to actually identify what we're going to do with it. So in our last day, I think, coming to an end, there's a little saying I actually looked at once before. There were two things. One of them was a book by Dave, which was a law enforcement officer, who was saying that 2 law enforcement officers around the world, the Asians are the most foreign of the foreign to us. In other words, they seem quite different to us, not just looks, but culture. And there's a little sneaking of truth to me that maybe the Kiwi sees the Asian through ignorance and through just as very foreign to them, and there's an opportunity there, I think, to change that, to actually break that down from our part of it through communication, through being together. If we like each other more when we're together, let's grow the opportunities to be together. And that's down to employment, because, for example, I know some banks, a lot of the banks are really good. There are Asian members there to help, and I think that actually helps grow the relationships in the banks. I might be wrong. Certainly in the police, we want to grow. We need to be about at least 7% Asian, if not more, so that we can actually do better in terms of serving their needs. So I hope that addresses the issues. And the last thing I think I'd say is we need to listen with a kind heart and then do something. Thank you.